February 11, 1968. The fog over Khe Sanh combat base is so thick you could almost chew on it. It reeks of gunpowder, decay, and diesel fuel. In the distance, enemy artillery pounds away, a relentless, terrifying heartbeat. Suddenly, the sky splits open. A storm of North Vietnamese rockets screams down, slamming into the base one after another. The ground heaves, throwing men from their feet. Sandbags explode like party poppers. Bunkers crumble. Fuel dumps turn into towering infernos, lighting up the night with an orange hellish glow. A young Marine, barely out of his teens, clutches his rifle, his knuckles bone-white in the eerie light of flares. He can't see the enemy, just fleeting shadows, a flicker of movement in the smoke. But he can feel them. He feels thousands of eyes watching from the darkness, closing in from every side. The radio crackles with desperate voices before dissolving into static. They're inside the wire. Repeat, they're in silence. Across the base, a command bunker shudders from a nearby explosion. Inside, officers stare at maps that are already useless. The supply lines are cut. The weather is too bad for air support. Ammunition is disappearing faster than they can count it. Outside, the enemy isn't launching a full-scale charge. They're just moving through the smoke, tightening the noose. 6,000 U.S. Marines are completely surrounded by 2 divisions of the North Vietnamese Army. The base is an island, totally isolated. Reinforcements can't get through by land, and planes can't fly. Intelligence reports say the enemy is digging trenches, getting closer with every passing hour. This isn't just a battle, it's a siege. Back in Washington, politicians are whispering about Dien Bien Phu, the disastrous French defeat that happened just over a decade earlier. If Khe Sanh falls, it won't just be a military catastrophe. It will be a political earthquake, shaking the very foundation of the war effort. For the commanders on the ground, the choice is impossible. Hold at all costs and risk being wiped out, or retreat and hand the enemy a vital strategic victory. The fate of the war might just hang on this one small, forsaken outpost. A remote jungle plateau. Dirt rains from the ceiling of a bunker. The lights flicker. Outside, another barrage begins. If this base holds, the attackers bleed for nothing. But no one says the real fear aloud. What if the enemy wants them trapped here? What if this siege is only a distraction? Thousands of miles away, millions sleep, unaware that history is about to pivot. They will soon wake to a different war. A war with no front line, no clear victory, and no end in sight. The Vietnam War, 20 years, millions dead, no victory. And the question that haunted commanders in that bunker still echoes today. Were they defending a vital stronghold, or walking into a trap designed to break a superpower? The world that produced this conflict simmered for decades. After World War II, empires were disintegrating. France tried to reclaim its colony in Indochina, but resistance had already formed around a revolutionary figure, Ho Chi Minh. After a brutal decade-long war, French colonial rule collapsed at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The peace accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, north and south. Communist and anti-communist reunification elections were promised, but they never happened. Washington, fearing a domino effect of communism spreading through Southeast Asia, adopted a policy of containment. No more losses. In the South, the U.S. backed the authoritarian government of Ng Anh Diem. His rule was marked by corruption and brutal suppression of dissent. When Diem was assassinated in a coup tacitly supported by U.S. officials, the instability deepened. A southern insurgency, the Viet Cong, began dismantling government control, village by village. They struck at night and vanished by dawn. American advisors arrived first, then combat units, then more. Each escalation was justified as necessary to stabilize the situation. Meanwhile, the North prepared for a long war, moving supplies and troops south along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. From Washington's view, it was a limited intervention. From Hanoi's, it was a war for national liberation. By the mid-1960s, it had become a proxy war between superpowers. At the center of American decision-making was Lyndon B. Johnson. He inherited the presidency in a consuming fear of being the one who lost Vietnam. He worried withdrawal would brand him weak, yet he also knew the war might be unwinnable. His adversary, North Vietnam's General Viet Nguyen Giop, understood he couldn't defeat American technology head-on, so he chose endurance, attrition, psychological warfare. His goal was not to conquer territory, but to erode the American will to fight. Two men, separated by ideology and geography, both believed they were fighting for survival. Both underestimated the cost. American military planners relied on overwhelming firepower. Helicopters provided unprecedented mobility. B-52 bombers leveled entire sections of jungle. Body counts became the metric of success. Yet the enemy kept coming. Villages cleared one day were hostile the next. The jungle itself was an adversary, with its triple canopy, monsoon rains, and vast tunnel networks. In 1964, a disputed incident in the Gulf of Tonkin gave President Johnson the political cover he needed for massive escalation. Operation Rolling Thunder, a sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam, began. It was meant to force negotiations. Instead, it hardened resolve. By 1967, nearly 500,000 American troops were in Vietnam. They won tactical victories, but strategic clarity was nowhere in sight. Then came the build-up that no one in Washington fully understood. North Vietnamese planners were preparing a nationwide offensive timed for the Tet holiday, traditionally a ceasefire. On January 31, 1968, attacks erupted simultaneously across South Vietnam, Saigon, Hue, dozens of provincial capitals. Even the U.S. Embassy compound was assaulted. For Americans watching on television, the message was devastating. The enemy was not contained. The war was not being won. In the ancient city of Huc, street fighting raged for weeks. At the besieged base of Khe Sanh, Marines fought for their lives, wondering if they were the main target or just a diversion. The base held the offensive was eventually pushed back. Tactically, it was a devastating military defeat for the North and the Viet Cong, but strategically, the effect was seismic. American public confidence shattered. If the enemy could strike everywhere at once, what did victory even mean? Protests erupted across the U.S. in March 1968. A politically broken Lyndon Johnson announced he would not seek re-election. His successor, Richard Nixon, promised peace with honor. His strategy was Vietnamization, training South Vietnamese forces to take over while gradually withdrawing American troops. But at the same time, the war widened, with bombing campaigns expanding into neighboring Cambodia and Laos. Finally, in 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. American combat troops withdrew, prisoners of war returned home, but the underlying conflict was far from over. 2 years later, North Vietnam launched a final, conventional offensive. The South Vietnamese army collapsed with shocking speed. On April 30, 1975, tanks rolled into Saigon. The war was over. The human cost was staggering. Over 58,000 Americans dead, millions of Vietnamese military and civilian casualties for the United States. The war eroded trust in government and left a deep scar on the national psyche. The Vietnam Syndrome. For Vietnam, reunification came at the price of economic isolation and a landscape littered with unexploded ordnance. The pivotal miscalculation wasn't a lack of firepower or bravery. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the war itself. American strategy sought a decisive military victory. North Vietnamese strategy sought to exhaust an opponent's political will. Every bomb dropped, every battle won by U.S. forces, was measured against a different strategic clock once set. Not in Washington, but in Hanoi. Bombing could destroy bridges and bases, but it could not destroy resolve. The war pioneered new technologies and tactics, from helicopter air mobility to real-time television coverage, but it also demonstrated the limits of conventional power against a determined insurgency. Today, the landscapes of Vietnam are green again. Cities hum with commerce, but beneath the surface lie the memories and the unanswered questions. What defines victory in a war where the enemy's strategy is simply not to lose? How many lives can be spent before a nation realizes it is fighting the wrong kind of war? 20 years, millions dead. No victory. Only the enduring shadow of a conflict that proved even the most powerful armies can find themselves trapped, not by terrain, but by their own assumptions. Because in Vietnam, the battlefield was never just the jungle, it was time itself. And time, once lost, never surrenders.